Seaman. I am the chair of the board. I have the honor of welcoming everyone to the 8th annual fundraising event, Sparking Connections. Our goal for tonight is to convert you guys into enthusiasts. And I'll just give you a warning. I was invited to this event, I think it was 6 years ago, didn't exactly know what ILAO was, thought I was at a traditional legal aid event, and here I am, I'm now the chair of the board. This is a really unique organization. There aren't many organizations in the entire country that do what we do. So I hope this is a really inspiring event, particularly in the current environment. Our mission is particularly important. So with that, I will turn it over to Jason Mark, and I will be at the bar.
I'm thrilled to MC this event for a number of reasons, and one of them is because of who it honors tonight, the great Jill Wine-Banks. So here to introduce our early adopter awardee is Neil Hartigan, the former Attorney General of Illinois and former Lieutenant Governor of Illinois. Neil is also Jill's former boss, and it says a lot when your old boss agrees to introduce you. Please welcome to the stage Neil Hartigan.
Thank you very much. The introduction was wrong, however. I'm not the boss. Jill was my boss. And every time I got a line, she whacked me with this thing, so that's why I'm stuck with it. Jill's done an awful lot of things in her life that nobody else has done. You know, the combination public and private, I mean, she broke so many, you know, the glass ceiling, she's broken about 7 or 8 of those that I can think of all by herself, adapting, just as this organization is adapting. So I can go on and on as far as the list of her accomplishments, whether it's in the private sector, it's in the philanthropic sector, it's in every human activity you can imagine. And one of the best things about Jill is she and a good pal of mine, her husband Michael, have 38 years of the best marriage that I know of. I want you to meet my friend, Jill Wine-Banks.
Thank you, and thank you to ILAO for this wonderful honor, and to my husband, of course, I thank him, and to my goddaughter who's here, and to my friends who are here. I appreciate you all coming out, and I do want to thank ILAO for all that they do to help in such an important area. We need it more now than ever. This administration in Washington is making you more and more necessary, so I appreciate your efforts. I also want to thank them for not just the award, but for the pin. They have added this absolutely beautiful pin to my collection. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, you know that I have my own hashtag for my pins, hashtag Jill's Pins, and you can follow them, and this one will definitely get worn on television. It does have a great meaning in terms of sparking connections, and I will talk a little bit about that, but I want to start first by repeating some advice that my favorite aunt gave me, which was to stand up tall so that they would see you, to speak up loudly so they'll hear you, and to sit down fast so they'll appreciate you. So I will follow that advice. I was asked to talk about being an early adopter and also about sparking connections. And so I'm going to do both of those. And it's, as Neil has made clear, I was an early adopter. When I first graduated from law school, only 2% of all lawyers in the country were women. There was a quota in my class, 5% were female, that was it. And when you went for job interviews, you were asked questions like, what kind of birth control do you use? How many children do you plan to have? I see shocked looks. I swear this is true. These were questions that you were not only asked, but you had to answer, because you would not get hired if you didn't answer them. Help wanted ads were listed in newspapers then. There was nothing online. And they said help wanted male, help wanted female. And if you were the wrong gender, you could not apply for a job. So the world has changed a lot since then. But somehow, and I really can't explain what it was in me that allowed me to take the risk of proceeding in the way I did, not just in law school, but then I picked litigation as my field, which was, for the 2% of lawyers who were women, none of them were in litigation. They did trust and estates or real estate. They weren't doing trials. And if they were doing trials, they certainly wouldn't have picked the organized crime section. But somehow I did. And actually, the same is true for all the other things that I've done where I've just sort of said, that sounds interesting, I think I'll do it. And that includes, obviously, Watergate, which, you know, when I went over to Watergate, I didn't know, no one knew what it would turn out to be. It could have just been, does anybody remember Billygate, which involved beer, as I recall? I mean, it turned out to be nothing. So we didn't know at the time, and I took the risk. When I was offered a job in the Pentagon, I said, I don't know anything about the military. I wouldn't even recognize a general if I saw one. But the job description that the transition team prepares sounded really interesting, and I thought, I'm going to take a chance. And all of those chances have led to really amazing opportunities, not just for my own career, but to be able to contribute in ways that I could have never foreseen. When I switched to Motorola, I was on the business side. I was not on the legal side. I was doing international business development for them. And it allowed me such an amazing experience. I couldn't believe they were paying me. It was so much fun. And the same thing was true at CPS. No, not that they were paying me so much. That was definitely not the case. But that I was able to create an entirely new approach to career and technical education. One of the things I'm proudest of in my life was creating something called DeVry Advantage Academy, which is a high school where students graduate in 4 years with a diploma and an associate's degree from DeVry. They are qualified for jobs that pay, well, when I first created it, it was $35,000. I'm sure it's much more now, which is much more than most students at CPS could ever aspire to. So that was a wonderful thing. And all of these risks I took were calculated. I didn't just jump in. I thought about what I was doing, but I was willing to take the chance. I don't know why, but it just seemed like the right thing to do. There are a lot of benefits for those chances. Neil mentioned about opening doors for women in the Pentagon. When I got to the Pentagon, there was still a women's Army Corps. And there were 2 women who could be generals, the head of the Women's Army Corps and the head of the Nursing Corps. All other generals in the military were in the regular Army. By eliminating through legislation the Women's Army Corps, women were eligible to become, for example, any job in the United States Army. The head of the JAG Corps couldn't have been a woman until you eliminated the Women's Army Corps. Now, why couldn't a woman be the head of the JAG Corps? Well, because it was a regular Army slot. So it's given me a great opportunity to help other women. And I saw this sort of come full circle when I was serving recently on the panel looking at sexual assault in the military. We had a lot of testimony from a lot of panels, and one of our final panels was a group of 6 admirals. And when they walked in, I almost burst into tears because 5 of the 6 were women. And the lowest ranking one was a man. Thank you. It was really a great thing. And I will also say, when I left the Pentagon to move to Chicago, my successor was a woman. And that to me is another great accomplishment, is that I didn't screw up the job so badly that they said, well, women just can't do that job. But the other thing is that you don't take a risk alone. You need a partner for the risk. I mean, the Attorney General took a risk in hiring me. The Department of Justice certainly took a risk. I noticed that they probably hadn't noticed I was a woman because about a year after I started in the organized crime section, I realized that my male colleagues who started around the same time were trying cases, and I was still arguing appeals, which was how all lawyers in the department started. You start with appeals, you see the mistakes that lawyers make so that you don't make them when you go into trial. It probably is the only thing that qualified me, by the way, to being Neil's Solicitor General, was that I had done all the appeals in the department. But I wanted to try cases, so I had to figure out, how do I do this? I didn't have anybody to ask. I was the only woman there. And I finally thought, well, I guess I just have to go talk to the boss. And I went to him and I said, so how come I'm not trying cases? And he said, well, you're a girl. And you're much more vulnerable than the men. In appellate, you're with just lawyers. In a trial, the mafia will be in the room with you. And I just asked him what he had failed to notice about me when he hired me as a trial lawyer. And finally he gave in and let me have my first trial. And since I didn't fall apart during that, I got my second, and then it was all fine. I had no more trouble. But I did learn an important lesson. and that is sometimes you have to confront sexism. Sometimes you do it a little more gently. Sometimes it takes direct confrontation, and that you have to speak up for yourself. Neil also mentioned Rosemary Woods in the 18-minute gap, and a lot of people think that I questioned her because it was woman on woman. That isn't correct. It was because I thought that my colleague Rick Benveniste was taking too many witnesses, and I called him out in the hallway in between witnesses, and I said, I'm taking the next witness, and we're going to share equally after that. The next witness called by the White House happened to be Rosemary Woods. That's how I got her, speaking up for myself, and I advise all of you to do the same. So with MSNBC, I think they took less of a risk because they got to sort of audition me for free before they hired me. They call you and you're so excited to be on air that you do it. And a lot of people have asked what it's like doing it. Well, the first thing is I do it from 10 South LaSalle, which is an office building. It's a black box studio. I don't even see the camera. The cameraman is operating the camera remotely. I don't see the host. I don't see the other guests. I have a little earpiece where I hear people. And I'm talking to a white arrow pointing to where the lens that I don't see is. So it's very hard when you're staring at this white arrow to feel like you're having a conversation. When you do shows in New York, it's so much better because you're actually looking at a person. You're talking to the host. You can see the other guests. I've been on panels, for example, with like Michael Avenatti, and I haven't always agreed with him. Once I was really upset with what he said, and I was going to take him on, and then I thought, I'm at such a disadvantage. I don't see him. I don't see the host. He's in the studio with the host. So I couched my words much more carefully than I would have if I had been in the studio. So there's a big advantage to being live in the studio. And a lot of people have asked, so what is the advantages of, sparking connections? And aside from the work that ILAO does, there are a lot of advantages to connecting. And I would say there are two parts of that. One is mentoring, and everybody in this room should have a mentee, and you should work with them and help them because you have accomplished a lot if you're here. And if you're here, you should be helping someone else to get here. But networking in and of itself is a great skill to have. It's led to almost every job I had. I got the job in organized crime because I met someone through a relative who was in the organized crime section, and he introduced me to the head of the section. I got my job at Motorola because a very good friend was on a board of sort of a volunteer with CPS and heard that they were looking for someone from the corporate world to help them create this career and technical education department. I got my job in Watergate because my first boss at the Department of Justice was one of the people hired right away, and he recommended me. And MSNBC, I also got through connections. I was trying to write a book. I met someone at a Christmas party who said, oh, you should apply to go to Ragdale, which I had never heard of. It's a writer's retreat. Not just writers, but there's also visual artists and musical people as well. And so I applied and I got in, and then I met some people there, and one of them called me in April in 2017 and said, I just heard about a course in op-ed writing, and I'll bet you have something to say right now. You should take that course. So I looked up the course. It was a Sunday. It turned out it was Sunday on May 7th. On May 9th, 2 days later, Comey was fired, and I had something to say. I had taken the course. I thought, I better use what I learned. And I sat down and I wrote an op-ed, and that got published a few days later. And as a result of the op-ed, television stations started calling me saying, we'd like to have you on. And that's how I ended up having this wonderful career at MSNBC. It's all through networking. It's all through taking risks, taking chances. So I want you all to keep that in mind as you decide about what risk you're willing to take and about helping others along the way. So thank you very much.
So this is the Early Adopter Award. And it's to Jill Winebanks for fearlessly blazing new trails everywhere you go and demonstrating why being first makes a difference. Thanks, Jill. Thank you.